What happens when a flawless life is built on a flawless lie? Tonight we take you inside the most prestigious event of the year, the Silver Crescent Gala, where billionaire biotech entrepreneur Gregory Ward was set to be honored. But the real story wasn't his award. It was the moment his glamorous mistress, Vivienne Black, kissed him on stage in front of everyone and in front of his pregnant wife. But his wife, Marissa Hale Ward, didn't cry. She didn't scream. She did something no one saw coming. She walked past her husband, picked up the microphone, and shook the foundations of his empire. The atmosphere in the grand ballroom of the Fairmont San Francisco was not just air-conditioned. It was orchestrated. It carried the scent of wealth, a sharp trace of power blended with the sweetness of thousands of white lilies, their petals trembling under the glow of chandeliers that shed crystals like frozen rain. This was the Silver Crescent Gala, the West Coast's premier philanthropic night, and this evening its spotlight belonged to Gregory Ward. Marissa Hale Ward observed her husband from their table, a prime seat near the edge of the polished marble dance floor. One hand rested gently on the curve of her belly, where their baby, their first, stirred softly. 7 months along. It felt like a lifetime, and no time at all. She wore a flowing sapphire gown by Elie Saab, the fabric whispering across her transformed body. She had never felt more striking or more exposed. Gregory was pure brilliance. At 45, he radiated the restless momentum of a younger man, tempered by the calculated stillness of a billionaire who'd transformed Helix One from a lab startup into a biomedical titan. He glided through the crowd like a predator, all gleaming smiles and decisive handshakes, his custom Brioni suit fitting like armor. He was hers. The world believed it. But recently, a quiet, creeping unease had started to eat away at the certainty she once clung to. It was the subtle things. The midnight phone calls taken behind his office door, softly shut. The trace of perfume she never wore, lingering faintly on his collar. The way his thumb would pause above his screen, that near-invisible hesitation before he slid the phone away when she entered the room. When she confronted him, he'd laughed, deep, confident, almost convincing. "Riss, sweetheart," he'd said, brushing a kiss on her forehead. "Pregnant and paranoid. You're too cute. You and our little one are all I think about." But tonight, her doubt was no longer starving. She saw her across the room. Near the curated auction pieces stood a woman in a blood-red dress so bold it might as well have been a challenge. It hugged a figure built on control and confidence. Her hair, dark and gleaming like lacquer, fell smooth over her shoulders. Her smile, as she exchanged pleasantries with a senator, could slice through steel. Vivienne Black, executive director of corporate strategy at a competing firm. Riss had heard of her, known her reputation, formidable, calculating, magnetic. She'd seen Gregory with her once, a month ago, at a working lunch. He'd brushed it off as a business necessity. But Riss had caught the way Vivienne leaned in, her hand grazing Gregory's forearm a second longer than it should have. She'd noticed how he hadn't moved away. Now, across the glittering room, their eyes locked. Vivienne's expression flickered with triumph, a smirk of certainty that vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. Riss's breath hitched just slightly, so slight no one else would have noticed. But inside it was as if something ancient and feral had stirred in her. The back of her neck tingled. Her fingers curled reflexively over the curve of her belly, a silent, instinctual gesture. This wasn't jealousy, it wasn't even anger. It was something colder, deeper. An alertness born from knowing a predator when she saw one. Riss felt it, a chill, a primal warning that had nothing to do with the ballroom's controlled climate. "He's remarkable, isn't he?" The voice beside her startled Riss. It belonged to Marla Dayton, a society doyenne whose smooth, taut face was a tribute to high-end cosmetic procedures. "He is?" Riss answered, offering a strained smile. "And you, darling, are glowing. Absolutely luminous," Marla gushed, though her eyes had already moved toward Gregory. He's moments away from his big speech, the man of the night, clearly. At that moment, the master of ceremonies stepped up to the podium, his voice booming over the hall's sound system. A man whose vision is equaled only by his philanthropy. Please welcome this year's Silver Crescent honoree, the founder and CEO of Helix One, Mr. Gregory Ward. A wave of applause crashed through the ballroom. Gregory, exuding humility and power, climbed the short staircase to the stage. He kissed the MC's wife on the cheek, shook his hand, and approached the microphone. The room darkened slightly, save for a sharp white spotlight fixed on him. He looked radiant. He spoke of science, responsibility, and legacy. As he uttered the word, his eyes landed on Riss in the audience. He smiled, a real soft smile, that for one fleeting moment calmed the storm in her gut. He meant them, their child, their future. This legacy, Gregory said, his tone heavy with feeling, doesn't belong to me alone. It's founded on the strength of a partnership with my brilliant, beautiful wife, Marissa. He gestured toward her, and the crowd erupted again. A flush of relief and warmth crept up Riss's neck. She felt silly now, pregnant and overly sensitive. Gregory was reaching his conclusion. So thank you for this tremendous honor. It's a reminder that what we build must endure, long beyond us, for the generations to come. And then it happened. From stage left, a streak of crimson cut through the shadows. It was Vivienne Black. She advanced with the measured poise of a predator, heading directly into the spotlight. Some guests murmured, assuming she was there to present him with the award. Gregory hesitated, clearly puzzled. His speech paused. Vivienne didn't stop until she was right in front of him. The entire room froze. Silence fell. Only the sound of camera shutters filled the air. With a confident smile, Vivienne reached up, not with an award, but with both hands. She adjusted his already perfect tie, her fingertips grazing his chest. Then she leaned close, whispering something that only he could hear. Gregory's expression stiffened. Then she stood on tiptoe, cradled his face in her hands, and kissed him. This wasn't a polite peck. It was slow, intentional, claiming. Right there, in the spotlight, in front of 500 of San Francisco's elite, in front of his wife. The camera flashes exploded, a brutal, blinding storm of light, catching every damning instant in perfect clarity. The gnawing doubt in Riss's stomach was gone. In its place, something colder and fiercer awakened. The carefully controlled air turned thin, impossible to inhale. The chandeliers overhead gleamed mockingly, their brilliance suddenly cruel and distant. Her world had just ruptured, split clean in two. Time didn't flow normally. It warped, twisted, snapped back. The kiss ended, but the image was scorched behind her eyelids. Vivienne's crimson-coated lips parted from Gregory's. A thin, glistening string of saliva briefly connected them, then snapped. Gregory shoved her back. The movement was sluggish, delayed, like his body hadn't caught up with the horror unfolding. His face froze, caught between disbelief and raw panic. He searched the crowd. His eyes were wide, bewildered, pleading. They found Riss, the regret, the dread, the silent beg for forgiveness, all there. But it didn't matter. The betrayal had gone viral in real time. Vivienne, by contrast, looked utterly composed. She took one step back. Not like a jilted lover, but like a CEO wrapping up a hostile acquisition. She offered a subtle nod to someone seated beyond the stage lights, then turned and exited with the same slow confidence she'd arrived with, leaving Gregory to stand alone in the wreckage of his public downfall. Gasps fluttered through the room like wind hitting glass. Then came the buzzing. Hushed voices, the rustling of phones pulled out and pointed like weapons. Conversations bloomed, louder, sharper. Beside Riss, Marla Dayton looked like she'd just seen an apparition. Riss felt nothing, and then everything. Not the heavy grief she might have expected. It was something elemental, chemical, a transformation in her bloodstream. The initial chill locked her heart in ice, only to be shattered by a surge of blinding heat. Rage, pure, exact, surgical. Her baby kicked, firm and sudden. Like it agreed, this wouldn't be allowed to stand. Her senses tunneled inward. The ballroom blurred, the faces vanished. Only three things existed now. The man frozen on stage, the woman in red vanishing into the curtains, and the slim silver microphone gleaming at the lectern. Still active, still waiting. Gregory began to speak. To ladies and gentlemen, please. There's been some confusion. But no one was listening. They were all staring at her. Riss slid her chair back. Its legs scraped the polished floor with a sharp, deliberate screech. The sound sliced through the chaos. She stood. Her movements weren't frenzied or unstable. They were composed, each motion filled with an eerie calm far more unnerving than any dramatic display. She folded her napkin and set it on the table with precise care. Riss, don't. Gregory's voice cracked from the stage, the microphone catching every note of his desperation. She didn't react. Her eyes locked on the platform ahead. Inside her, everything slowed. Each second felt measured, as if the world had taken a breath and held it, waiting to see what she would do. Her heart was no longer racing. It was steady, resolute, and in that stillness she found power. She walked forward. The crowd peeled away like fabric being torn down the middle. The murmurs ceased. Even the camera shutters paused. Every gaze followed the pregnant woman in the sapphire gown, as she moved not toward her husband in forgiveness, but directly to the podium. A flustered coordinator, clipboard clutched in panic, stepped into her path. "Mrs. Ward, if we could just—" She didn't acknowledge him. She lifted one hand, graceful, dismissive. A queen silencing a servant. He froze where he stood. She climbed the steps, her heels echoing with unwavering rhythm. She passed Gregory without a glance. He may as well have been a statue. She approached the lectern. Her fingers curled around the cold steel microphone. She lifted it from its cradle, felt the heft, the gravity. The cold metal grounded her. It was more than just a microphone. It was her weapon, her reckoning, and she would wield it without mercy. She held the room's silence in her grip. Then she raised it to her lips. Her voice wasn't loud, wasn't trembling. It was controlled, crystalline, and it dropped the temperature in the ballroom like a sudden cold front. "Good evening," she said, every syllable carrying into the farthest corners. "Please, don't stop talking on my account. I'm sure your conversations just became vastly more engaging." Uneasy laughter rippled across the guests. Gregory looked like he might collapse. "My husband Gregory was speaking of legacy," Riss went on, eyes calmly sweeping the room, locking with stunned expressions. "It's a word he favors. Building a legacy, leaving a legacy. The Ward legacy." She paused, letting it sink in. The silence stretched, tense, expectant. "And I'd like to thank Miss of Black," she said next, each word dipped in poison-laced civility, "for her vivid contribution this evening. She's shown us, in no uncertain terms, the real foundation of Gregory's legacy: deceit, disgrace, and catastrophically poor judgment." The room was so silent, the clink of melting ice in the water glasses rang out like a bell. But here's a small fact about our partnership, about the foundation of Helix One, that Gregory seems to have conveniently overlooked in his hunt for other acquisitions. Riss's gaze turned magnetic, rooting the city's elite to their seats with quiet force. "When we were married, my father, Samuel Hale, a name most of you remember as Gregory's earliest and most influential backer, didn't just walk me down the aisle. He handed me his entire equity in this company. It was placed in a family trust, of which I am the sole primary beneficiary. That trust has held, since our wedding day, a 48% controlling interest in Helix One." Gasps rolled through the room in cascading waves. Executives seated near the front table looked at each other in shock and growing alarm. Gregory's face turned from ashen to near translucent. For the first time, he actually saw her, no longer as the supportive wife he took for granted, but as something far more dangerous: a reckoning, a ruler, a force. The air shifted, not just in temperature, but in weight. Riss could feel the balance of power tilting, finally, tangibly in her direction, and she didn't flinch. She stepped into it with the certainty of someone who had spent too long waiting for this exact moment. "It was a wedding present," Riss continued, the faintest hint of a cold smile lifting her lips. "My father always told me to protect my assets. Turns out he was the smartest man in the room." She paused, resting her hand gently on her stomach again. "Gregory spoke of the future, of legacy, and he's not wrong. In just 8 weeks, I'll be bringing the next generation of the Hale family into this world, the heirs to the majority share of this company. And I'll be damned if my child's inheritance, my father's vision, is stained by a tabloid-worthy disgrace like this." Her voice, still calm, now carried a sharpened edge, the kind honed not by anger, but by betrayal. She had loved him once, trusted him, and now she was burying that love, one public revelation at a time. Her gaze locked on Gregory at last. The chill in her eyes could have frozen steel. "So, effective immediately, I will be invoking my full rights as controlling shareholder. I will be calling an emergency board meeting first thing tomorrow to evaluate the company's leadership going forward. And right now, I'd like to make another announcement. I will be filing for divorce." She turned her attention back to the stunned crowd, surveying the silent ballroom one final time. "Thank you for your attention, and please, do enjoy the salmon." She released the microphone. It didn't fall with a clang, it dropped with a heavy, final thump. The sound rang out across the hushed room like a closing gavel. The end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Riss pivoted, and without a single glance back at the man she had just surgically dismantled, she strode off the stage, through the parted crowd, and out of the ballroom, her head unbowed, leaving stunned chaos in her wake. The doors of the Fairmont closed behind her, muting the firestorm she had set off. The cool night air slapped her cheeks, sharp and clean after the suffocating air inside. She leaned briefly against the chilled stone wall outside. The adrenaline that had carried her through the last 10 minutes was beginning to fade, leaving only an aching, raw void behind. Her strength had carried her through the storm. But strength was not immunity. The truth of what she had lost swept through her, slow and sorrowful. There were no tears yet, only silence. The kind that follows a demolition. The fire inside her had burned out, for now. In its place came a deeper quake, grief. Her marriage was over. The man she thought she loved never existed. A uniformed doorman hurried toward her. "Mrs. Ward, are you all right? Shall I call for your car?" "Yes, please, Marcus," she replied, her voice even and composed. She would not fall apart here. Not in public. Not now. The black Mercedes eased up to the curb. As Riss stepped inside, her phone, left behind in her evening clutch, began to shriek. Gregory. She glanced at the screen, at the name that once stirred her heart, and nausea rolled through her. Decline. It rang again. Declined. Then, a message lit up. "Riss, please, we need to talk." It wasn't what it looked like. She laughed, a short, bitter, humorless sound. Not what it looked like. It was exactly what it looked like. A public betrayal, brazen and deliberate. She powered off the phone and slipped it into her bag like something toxic. The drive to their Pacific Heights penthouse, the place she'd once poured love into, decorating every detail, felt like she was returning to a ghost town. Every street, every cafe, every skyline view whispered reminders of a life that no longer existed. "Samuel," Riss said. Satisfaction laced his response. "Your father was always 10 steps ahead, Riss. He used to say Gregory's ambition burned like a rocket, but he made sure you kept the ignition codes." He added, "This trust gives you more than shareholder authority. You control board appointments, veto rights on mergers, and most important, authority to initiate a vote of no confidence against the CEO for any act that harms the company's reputation or stability." A grim smile tugged at Riss's lips. Harm to the company's reputation. Her father hadn't just anticipated this. He'd built a weapon for it. This wasn't just a shield, it was retribution. The second act had begun. An arc that began years ago in the quiet legalese of trust documents and the unspoken strategy of a man who saw farther than most. Samuel Hale hadn't just mentored Gregory, he'd funded him, opened doors, introduced the right people. Helix One didn't begin with Gregory's brilliance, it began with Hale's backing. The trust wasn't charity. It was control. It was Samuel Hale's way of guaranteeing his daughter would hold the strings. Forever. As Riss and Samuel quietly shaped the next move, another meeting unfolded across the city, inside a sleek, glass-walled office above Central Park West. Vivienne Black stood in front of Julian Croft, the CEO of Etheria, Helix One's fiercest competitor. Croft's smile didn't reach his eyes, and those eyes were glacial. "That was never the plan, Vivienne," he growled, slamming a tablet onto his desk. The headline read, "Marissa Hale Ward, the woman who now commands Helix One. We were supposed to ruin him, make him unviable, trigger a stock dive so we could stage a takeover," Croft barked. "Not crown his invisible wife as some corporate Joan of Arc. You were supposed to cripple him, not make her queen." "I didn't know about the trust," Vivienne stammered. Her confidence cracked. The leverage she thought she'd stolen had vanished into thin air. "He told me she was irrelevant, just his arm candy." "Well, she wasn't. And now your miscalculation might cost me billions," Croft said, his voice as sharp as broken glass. "Your role in this is over. Leave." Vivienne's eyes widened in disbelief. The executive title, the wealth, the influence, it was all slipping away. She had struck the match that ignited Gregory Ward's downfall, but the flames had consumed her too. She had been a pawn in someone else's empire, and she'd just been removed from the board. The sun rose over San Francisco, casting long shadows over the bay. For Gregory, it marked the beginning of a nightmare. For Vivienne, the first crack in her fall. But for Marissa Hale Ward, seated in her suite at the St. Regis, surrounded by attorneys and a pot of black coffee, it was the beginning of her command. The war had officially begun, engineered by Etheria to sabotage Helix 1. You'll find documented payments made to Ms. Black, who is present in this room, for the express purpose of orchestrating a scandal meant to destabilize our company. Vivienne flinched as though struck. Julian Croft's reptilian grin wavered for the first time. Wrist didn't slow. Her voice was unrelenting. Mr. Croft's proposal isn't a lifeline. It's the final play in a calculated act of corporate sabotage. What he didn't expect was that the company he planned to devour wasn't controlled by the man he targeted, but by me. She paused, letting the truth land like thunder. And I don't intend to see my father's work handed over to a predator in a designer suit. Then came her killing blow. For the past week, I've been far from idle. While Mr. Croft was preparing his victory speech, I was on calls with investors, people who knew and respected Samuel Hale. I've leveraged not only my personal assets, but the full holdings of the Hale estate to back a sweeping buyback initiative aimed at restoring confidence and protecting our market value. In addition, I've secured proxy commitments from enough undecided shareholders to ensure no hostile acquisition will pass. Etheria's bid is dead. This conversation is over. Silence blanketed the boardroom. Julian Croft's expression curdled, stunned, furious. He had underestimated her, dismissed her, and lost. However, Riss continued, turning back to the board, that doesn't resolve our internal problem. The market has lost confidence in our leadership. The brand is tarnished. We need change. Her eyes now fell on Gregory. He looked up at her, broken, desperate, but found no mercy in her face. Under the bylaws of the Hale Family Trust, which I've circulated, you'll find I hold the right to call a vote of no confidence in the CEO. I am exercising that right now. I move for the immediate removal of Gregory Ward as Chief Executive Officer of Helix 1. The room stilled. All in favor? She asked, her tone like ice through glass, hands raised around the table. Marcus Thorne, the rest of the board, unanimous. The architect of the company had been abandoned by the very people he once led. Gregory slumped, defeated. It was done. The motion passes, Riss said, voice flat. Gregory Ward is removed, effective immediately. I will assume the role of interim chairwoman as we begin the search for a new CEO. This meeting is concluded. She rose. She had done it. She had salvaged her father's company. She had reclaimed her name. She had delivered her own form of justice. As she left the boardroom, she passed Julian Croft, his glare pure venom. She met it with a smile like cut glass. She passed Vivienne Black, now shattered and silent, staring into nothing. And finally, she walked past Gregory, hollow and still in his seat. She didn't look back. She walked forward through the wreckage toward the life she would now build. Then she turned, one final time. And you are his father. You'll be present in his life. A deep wave of relief swept over Gregory's face. But it will be on my terms, she continued, voice regaining that firm authority. There will be boundaries, schedules, no ambiguity about where home is. You'll have access, but not power. Are we clear? Yes, he whispered. Anything, I understand. Good, she said briskly. My assistant will coordinate with your counsel. Dismissed. Gregory rose, a man given access, not absolution. He looked at her one last time, this remarkable woman who carried his child and whom he no longer deserved. Thank you, Riss, he murmured, then turned and walked out of the company, out of her life. Riss watched him go, then placed both hands gently over her abdomen, feeling the firm, steady kick of the future. This wasn't a fairy tale. There was no storybook reunion, no easy absolution. The betrayal had cut deep and would leave a scar that never truly vanished. But from those ruins, she had shaped something new. She was a mother. She was a leader. She was the sole architect of the life ahead. And that was a legacy worth defending. Samuel Hale Ward II was born 2 weeks later on a quiet Tuesday morning, with a tuft of dark hair like his mother's, and a cry that echoed through the private maternity suite at UCSF Medical Center. Holding him for the first time, swaddled and impossibly small against her chest, Riss felt everything fall into place. Gregory's betrayal, her victory in the boardroom, the loneliness she hadn't dared name. It all receded into background noise. The scent of his skin, the fragile rise and fall of his breath, the impossibly perfect weight of him in her arms, it rewrote her entire world. He wasn't just her son, he was her redemption, her reward. The one thing no betrayal could tarnish. In her arms was everything, her legacy, her compass, her reason. Every sleepless night, every calculated move after the gala had led her to this moment, to him. She was his shield now, and nothing would break through. The first 6 weeks blurred in a haze of midnight feedings, lullabies whispered in the dark, and quiet awe at this new little soul. She had moved into a bright, sprawling apartment in Pacific Heights, a place she chose, designed, and filled herself. It wasn't curated for show. It was real. It smelled of baby powder and lilies, was full of well-worn books and soft throws. It was her and Sam's haven. It was freedom, finally felt, not just imagined. A home built with intention, not expectation. For the first time, every piece of furniture, every photo on the wall, was a choice that belonged solely to her. Balancing the old world with the new was no small feat. One afternoon, in the middle of a high-stakes video call about an acquisition, Sam began to fuss. Without a flicker of hesitation, Riss muted her mic, scooped him from the bassinet, and gently rocked him against her shoulder. When it was her turn to speak, she unmuted and delivered a crisp, strategic response that ended the debate decisively. The image of the chairwoman, balancing the future of Helix One in one arm and her newborn son in the other, circulated quietly throughout the company. It became legend. Gregory kept his distance, per their binding agreement. His first visit was arranged with the sterile precision of a legal meeting. He arrived precisely on time, thinner and paler than before, a shell of the man he had once been. No power suit now, only neutral slacks and an oversized cashmere sweater. He carried a small blue box from Shreve & Co. Riss met him at the door, holding Sam, wide-eyed and alert, in her arms. The sight of them, united, unshakable, hit Gregory like a blow. Behind her, the apartment pulsed with life and color, not like the cold museum they once shared. This space was hers, and his presence felt alien in it. He was a visitor in the life he once helped build, now redesigned without him. The warmth, the light, the hum of something sacred in the air, it all made clear how thoroughly he had been written out. "He's perfect," Gregory murmured, eyes locked on the baby, avoiding hers. "He is," Riss answered, cool but civil. She didn't invite him in. The threshold was her boundary. "May I?" he asked softly, reaching with trembling hands. It wasn't entitlement, it was desperation. Riss hesitated. Every instinct urged her to pull back, to shield Sam from this man, from the heartbreak he represented. But she'd made a promise. This was their new world's first test. With a slow, measured breath, she passed her child into his father's arms. Gregory crumbled. The moment Sam settled against his chest, the weight of his failure broke through. A shattered sob escaped him as he held his son with trembling reverence, his tears soaking into the baby's soft blue blanket. In that moment, he wasn't a disgraced executive or a discarded husband. He was simply a father, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he had nearly lost for good. He looked down at the tiny face in his arms, a face that carried faint reflections of his own, and saw everything he had failed at, and the one thing that might still redeem him. Riss watched from a few feet away, her heart a battleground of clashing emotions. A flicker of pity passed through her for the broken man before her, a distant echo of the love she once held. But it was quickly eclipsed by a steady, unyielding determination. This man had shattered her world. She wouldn't let him lay a hand on their sons. "You have 1 hour, Gregory," she said quietly but firmly, before turning and walking away, leaving him with the baby in the entry hall, under the silent supervision of the nanny. The visits continued, twice a week. Always structured, always under her rules. Gregory behaved impeccably, quiet, respectful, focused entirely on Sam during his visits. But as the weeks slipped into months, another strategy surfaced, not with fireworks but with steady, calculated pressure. Gregory began a campaign of gifts. It started subtly, a sterling silver rattle from Shreve, a signed first edition of Goodnight Moon. Then the scale shifted. Dramatic, ostentatious attempts to plant a flag where he no longer had rights. A custom-designed electric baby car for an infant. A trust fund with enough zeros to make Wall Street blink. A private consultation with a celebrity child psychologist. Every gift was a message, a symbol of the influence he could no longer wield through proximity. A way to inject himself into a future he had forfeited. Riss returned them all, via polite, impersonal memos from her assistant. The confrontation broke one evening when Gregory sent a team of designers, uninvited, to propose a high-tech nursery renovation. She met him in the building lobby. "This ends now, Gregory," she said, her voice low and simmering. "I'm just trying to give him the best," he said, the old entitlement creeping back into his tone. "I want him to have everything." "He already does," she answered, icy calm. "He holds a controlling share in a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. His financial future was secured by my father and by me. What he needs from you is not money, it's values, stability. He needs a father, not a donor. You're not going to buy your way into a life you set on fire. Make no mistake, my son is not a transaction." The war for Helix One was finished, but the battle for their son's heart, for his future, was only beginning. This wasn't a corporate boardroom fight anymore. It was a quiet war fought in bedtime routines and boundaries. And every time Gregory tried to reassert dominance through influence, risks stood in his way. Then he changed tactics. If he couldn't buy Sam, he would co-opt his legacy. A week later, the headlines lit up. Gregory Ward and Samuel Hale Ward Sue Foundation for Pediatric Innovation launched with $15 endowment. It was slick, calculated. He had aligned his disgraced name with his son's under the guise of children's health. A PR masterstroke. If Riss fought back, she'd look like she was obstructing philanthropy. But she saw it clearly. A rebranding operation in disguise. A public merger of names and futures she hadn't authorized. It wasn't about the charity. It was a hijacking. She knew then. The battle wasn't over. Gregory had once mistaken her silence for fragility. He would never again mistake her motherhood for weakness. Her father had built a trust to guard his legacy. She would become the trust that guarded her sons. This wasn't just a story of betrayal. It was the story of a transformation. Marissa Hale Ward had lost a husband. Yes, but she had found herself. She discovered a resilience she hadn't known she possessed. A woman reborn, not as someone's wife, but as a force. As a mother, as a leader. She proved that even the deepest betrayals can forge the strongest convictions. Her journey stands as a reminder. You can rewrite your legacy, even when someone else tries to set it on fire. So that's how the story ends. And hey, you, our incredible friend, you're still here, aren't you? If you're still with us right now, then maybe, just maybe, something in this story touched your heart. Maybe it reminded you of your own quiet strength, or of a time you had to rise up when everything inside you felt broken. Because let's face it, life doesn't hand out neat endings or perfect justice. Sometimes, it burns you down first, just to see if you'll rebuild. And Marissa did. Not because she was fearless, but because she chose to stand in the fire and not let it define her. The ancient Stoics taught us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. You might not be in a boardroom or a spotlight like Riss, but maybe you've had to stand tall when someone tried to dim your light. Maybe you've had to let go of someone you loved because they couldn't love you right. Or maybe you're just here trying to make sense of what's next. Whatever your story is, we're honored to share this space with you. And if this journey stirred something in you, would you take a moment to like, share, or subscribe? Not just for us, but for the next person who might need a little reminder that they're not alone either. We're building a space for stories, for healing, for quiet revolutions of the soul, and we're so glad you're a part of it. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never forget who you are.